Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all today to our webinar, GapMaps, Choosing Your Next Location Based on Data and Facts, hosted by VF Franchise Consulting. Boy, we have quite a few people joining us today, and it really makes this event even more exciting. My name is Sean No, and I am the CEO of VF Franchise Consulting and the MC for today's webinar. Now, before we begin, just a few things to note before we get started. Um, Due to the brief interview format of the event today, we have collected in advance a list of questions from our attendees that we will address later on this webinar. Now, the chat room is open, and you can ask any questions for our speakers at any time, for our guest speaker or myself, and we will get to them if time allows. And also, please stay tuned until the end of the program. We have an exciting free gift for you for taking the time to join us today to learn more about what is GapMaps and what it can do for you. Now, we are very excited to have our guest speaker today, Mr. Tim Shaw. He is the CEO of GapMaps Asia, and Tim will briefly introduce GapMaps very shortly. Now, before we start, I would like to take just a minute to briefly introduce who is VF Franchise Consulting. We are a franchise and licensing consulting business based in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and we have been here for nearly 15 years. Our focus and our expertise is in franchise development, franchise sales, operational support for our clients, and also if you're looking to franchise your business, we do consulting work as well as various types of market research services that we provide to clients all across Asia. Now, when we talk about all across Asia, we're talking about, of course, here in Southeast Asia, that we like to call ASEAN, but it also includes North Asia, including places like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And of course, a very exciting South Asian market that is very eager for new franchise opportunities. And that includes obviously markets like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, etc. And last but not least, we also work in the GCC countries as well as the greater Middle East. Now, again, you can reach us for assistance in acquiring franchises, in selling franchises, in making your business franchisable, or any other consulting work that you require. Now, before we hand it over to Tim to briefly introduce himself and GapMaps, let's start off with a brief video of GapMaps. Okay, so that was a great video. It was very short, but hopefully it gave you a higher picture of what GapMaps can do for you. And now I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Tim Shaw. Tim?
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. It's great to be here today and have this opportunity to talk to so many of you about a topic that's close to my heart, which is location intelligence. So I'm Tim Shaw. I'm the CEO of GapMaps, and I have specific responsibility for Asia, the Middle East, and Central Africa. So GapMaps is a location intelligence consultancy. We provide location intelligence services to a large number of clients through many of the countries in Southeast and Central Asia, as well as MENA and Central Africa. And we provide those services to clients in a number of different ways. Firstly, through a platform that's called GapMaps. And GapMaps is a platform used by our clients to help them set appropriate market planning and network strategies, but then also make fact-based location decisions and introduce fact-based feasibility processes to help them select the right locations for their business that are consistent with the strategies that they've set. The expertise that we bring into this space is really about not just mapping, but it's also about building data. I think everyone on this call would be familiar with, this common criticism of data in Asia, that it's old, or that it's inaccurate, or it's in some way reliable and therefore difficult to use as part of a market planning process. And we recognize that. And so rather than just map publicly available data like census data, we actually spend a lot of time building our own data through not just Asia, but also the Middle East and Africa. And that enables us to build current data. So 2020 data is our current data set for resident populations, for worker populations, for what we call consuming class, at a very granular level. And the granularity is really important because it enables our clients to understand not just the number of people who live within a particular catchment area around a retail location, but also what level of prosperity exists within that area. So can the people who live in this local catchment afford to buy my particular product? And then also it's about the working population, because for many businesses, that the catchment areas that provide the customers for that particular store don't necessarily live in that catchment area, but they're there for work purposes. So understanding how many people work in a catchment area, as well as how many people live in that catchment area, are really important, particularly for sectors like cafes or childcare, or those types of sectors that have that very different demand or source of demand in the area. We work with a large number of brands, and that extends from the big global brands that we're all familiar with, KFC and Domino's and Pizza Hut and McDonald's and others. But we also do a lot of work with much smaller brands in the markets we operate in. So we like to think that we have global experience through the people we work with and the data that we build, but we also have local market expertise, and that comes through the people we partner with in each of the markets in which we operate in, to give us that sort of feet on the ground experience, so that we can understand the business processes and the customer processes in each market, so that our data can be applied to the individual requirements of each individual client, so that they exactly meet the demands of those clients in that market that walk in and out of those stores every day. So Sean, that's a brief overview of GapMaps and who we are and what we do. And again, it's great to be here on this call today.
Well, thank you for that, Tim. I appreciate it. And that's a great segue into our first question. And I know you kind of covered what is GapMaps in further detail earlier. What is it, in simple terms, in one or two sentences, what is the problem or challenge that GapMaps aims to solve for its customers?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Sean. And I think, this location intelligence topic is a big one, but there are some very simple and consistent client needs that we have globally. And that is, how many stores can I build in my market? And what's the right location for putting each of those individual stores? So it really is helping our clients set that top target in terms of what the market potential is, what we might call the market holding capacity, but then it's also, where are those catchment areas that have those sorts of attributes that we associate with high performing stores? Where are they? Where are the ones we need to be in? And also, why might those stores I currently have not be performing at the level they should be? Is it because operationally they're not being run particularly well? but also, is it actually about the catchment that they're in, and that the catchment doesn't actually provide that trade potential for a successful store?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you mentioned some of the high profile customers that I think most people would be aware of. Um, in terms of customers, we focus on franchising, right? So we're used to working with a lot of franchisors and franchisees at the local level, and franchisors oftentimes more on the regional and international level. Besides franchising, of course, are there any other sectors like retail or education or fashion or even real estate that you find you have as customers and they are, in need of this type of, location intelligence?
I think that's the key to the answer there, Sean, is that it's, what we provide is location intelligence. And I'll often say to customers, it doesn't matter whether you're selling widgets or gadgets or gadgets or burgers. Ultimately, a lot of that trade potential for a store or a business relates to that location catchment. And so our client base is quite diverse. It extends from your aged care, childcare, fitness clubs, retail restaurants, fast food locations, cafes, retail fuel locations. So it is quite broad. It really is about helping those businesses who need to understand local catchment demographics and local catchment sort of criteria, because they know that that's relevant to their store performance. So, and that extends across such a wide variety of different businesses.
Okay, excellent. What would you say are some of the most common mistakes when it comes to selecting the right location for a business? I'll give you an example. In places like Vietnam, real estate can be very expensive to acquire, to lease, and then also because oftentimes there's so much pent up demand for great locations that decisions have to be made within hours, not within days, not within weeks. And so, what are some of the most common mistakes that people get into when they're under these types of pressure?
Yeah, well, it could be a long list, Sean, and this could be a long conversation. But let me pick out a few of the main ones. And this is particularly true in expensive real estate markets, and I think that applies across not just Vietnam, but a lot of Southeast Asia. Real estate prices are high. One of the common mistakes we see is that clients we work with have had a history where they enter into locations where they can do a great deal. A great leasing deal. They get a large capital contribution for the fit out, or they'll get a year's rent free on a 5-year deal, or whatever it might be. And so decisions are made because a really good deal has been negotiated. But of course, a good deal is only a good deal if the store performs. And a store won't perform well because the rent's low. The store won't perform well because there's got a large capital contribution from a landlord. The store will perform well if it's in a really strong catchment. And so that's one of the mistakes we see, where our retailers we are working with have had a history of going into shopping malls or high street locations where they've done a great deal, but the catchment isn't actually very strong. I think one of the other sort of common criticisms or common mistakes we see is that some retailers just play it too safe. They stick to shopping malls. They stick to shopping malls because in the past they might have tried to build a location on a high street or in a residential area, and it didn't work. And so they go, and they lost a lot of money. And so they go, well, we're not making that mistake again. We're going to stick to shopping malls, where we all know shopping malls can be great, and there's certainly a part for shopping malls in the distribution strategy for many retailers. But in many cases, it should be a part of an overall network strategy and not be the dominant or predominant format or retail format for many brands. And so that mistake we see is that there's this sort of real reluctance to stretch outside shopping malls into different location types and format types, where often the profitability levels can be much higher if the right catchments are chosen for that particular business. One of the other mistakes we see quite a lot of is what we would call, whether a location passes the convenience test or not. And I think a lot of retailers misunderstand this important point, which is that it really doesn't matter what you're selling. We're all in the convenience business. So whether it's burgers or petrol or childcare or English tuition, it's still a convenience business. And unless the location is convenient to the customers you are trying to serve, you're going to find that the trade potential isn't what you thought it might have been. And so, we do find that a lot of clients have a history of not really thinking hard enough about that customer, what we would call travel journey, or their customer travel path, and how this particular location enables that customer to seamlessly slot in that purchase decision for their brand as part of their normal daily activity. So we need to, as a retailer, make sure that purchase opportunity is as seamless as possible for the customers who we want to come into our stores. And maybe the final one I'd like to pick on is, and I might have touched on this a little earlier, but it's really about ignoring data. And I think that is particularly in Asia, where there has been this long history of relatively poor quality data, old data that might be accurate, but it's in very big geographic areas, so not very effective for store decision making. And so I think in this day and age, retailers would ignore this high quality data. Excuse me, Sean. Retailers would ignore this high quality data at their peril. I think it's there for retailers to access and use as part of an informed decision making process.
You know what? I totally concur. I think prior to me starting this franchise consulting company, I helped bring in America's the first American burger chain to Vietnam, called Carl's Jr. And with that came a lot of learning lessons, and and making decisions without the data, without the demographics, without the estimated income levels, without the data that really kind of fine tunes your target market. And sometimes that means it's a shopping center. Sometimes it means maybe it's not the shopping center, right? And this is especially important in in markets like Jakarta, where you have over 200 shopping centers in one city, and then in places like Vietnam, for example, where shopping centers, some of them are good, but more often than not, some of them are really bad. And so relying on a shopping center focused strategy where that's your only avenue for growth is probably not the best strategy, right? And I think that's where the data really helps to kind of hone in on the right location. If there really is a right location, I know it's a challenge with regardless of whatever tool that you have, but at least you have more data to make your decisions. Now, we live in special times, as you know, Tim. And we've got COVID for the last year and a half. Now there are variants, and things are still in flux. Have you seen, in your experience, though, with your clients today and the clients that you bring on all across Asia, has COVID affected their expansions, and has it affected how they choose and select locations?
Yeah, certainly they are extraordinary times. And I guess we've been living through this long enough now to start to see some real patterns emerging. So we are far more knowledgeable about how COVID is impacting market planning and network strategies here today than we were 6 and 12 months ago. One of the first points I'd make is that what we are seeing is there are clear winners and losers that have come out of this COVID period. And And that's different to a recession or other sort of economic impacts that tend to have a broader impact businesses more broadly, where this COVID's been different in that it's been quite targeted about some of the businesses that it has hit extraordinarily hard, and others have actually benefited equally. So you think about some retailers, if you're in the pharmacy sector or the grocery sector, or in a country like Australia in the liquor sector, then these are good times. The sales are at historically high levels. But equally, if you're in that leisure and entertainment sector, these are very difficult times, requiring some very difficult business decisions to be made. So that's one of the first points I'd make, is that there are winners and losers in this process. The second point is in terms of the impacts of COVID, it's forced businesses to become more agile. So no longer is there one way of doing things as a retailer. Even if you're in the fast food sector, delivery is now an increasingly important part of the way you connect with customers. Pre-COVID, it was a front counter or a restaurant business, plus or minus drive-through, depending on the country and the format types. But delivery now, in all of the countries we operate in this fast food sector, has catapulted years ahead of where we thought it might be at this particular point in time. And so that's been a dramatic change that we're seeing. And of course, delivery then becomes a key criteria for considering network coverage questions, as well as sort of the feasibility processes that our clients should go through to understand the trade potential of a new store. It's no longer just about how many customers can we get into our dining room, and what sort of sales might we expect in our dining room, or how many cups of coffee might we be able to sell over the counter, or how many litres of fuel might we be able to sell through a fuel forecourt. It's now very much about also what is the trade potential for delivered product to be delivered from store and to customers who are at home, and that's been a big change. I think one of the other changes we're seeing is that businesses, and indeed the catchment areas they serve, are becoming generally more local. So people are shopping closer to home, and that creates sort of opportunities and threats for retailers. The opportunity is that as more people are working from home and staying closer to home, it gives you the opportunity to better penetrate your local catchment area. So instead of, for example, 50% of your customers coming from a 5-minute sort of walk time or drive time around your particular store, the potential might be now to grow that to 70 or 80% of your customer base coming from that very local area, because it's unlikely that the level of competition is increased within that very local area. So the challenge then for the retailer becomes, well, how do I get customers or residents who live within this area to visit me more frequently than they might have done in pre-COVID times? So that's just some of those examples of of what we're seeing post-COVID. So again, winners and losers, number one. Secondly, agility is just key. Your businesses need to be increasingly agile. Thirdly, delivery. Delivery in many of the sectors we work in is now a key part of the way that our retailers connect with their clients. And then local. We are becoming, this concept of a global village has never been more true today than it has been previously. I think this local connectedness is a really big topic for retailers to think about, and it will also drive store placement decisions in the future.
Thank you for that. That makes enormous sense, and certainly COVID has been challenging, and it only makes that site location decision even more important because of its impact on the P&L in the near and medium term. Now, in terms of services for GapMaps, Tim, obviously I think there is a subscription model where people can subscribe to GapMaps and have all the data that you mentioned and the tools, etc. But I think you kind of alluded to this too. There are tools where it can be things like shopping center reports, and there are things that you do on your end to make those reports. There are other types of analysis where, like you said, you could help businesses understand what are some of the key factors and attributes of an area or a trade zone that makes them more profitable than less profitable. Can you give some examples of some of these tools that you've used in the past and the types of benefits that customers could potentially reap by having access to these tools?
Yeah, I think, Sean, one of the ways to answer that question is a really simple way, which is to say that we as humans, process mapped data very differently to the way we process data that we might read from a report or read from a table of numbers on a spreadsheet. One of the first benefits our clients get from using a GapMaps platform is that they get to see visual data. So if I could give you a quick example, a brand might know that their particular customer base, might be slightly younger in age group and slightly higher income. And they might have designed their network about trying to be convenient to these pockets or catchments of people that are slightly younger and slightly higher income than the rest of the population through the city or through the country. And that may have driven their strategy for the last 5 or 10 years. If you ask that particular client before using GapMaps where the largest gaps were in their network and where the opportunities were to grow in the future, they would have some sort of broad view about where that might be, built on that sort of understanding of the city and the understanding of their client base. But I guarantee you, once we provide that client with access to that visual of their network mapped over the top of sort of this thematically ranged map with granular data shaded by, for example, the count of people of consuming class across the city, immediately that client will see those pockets of opportunity in the city that they had no idea existed previously. So it really does enable our clients to think about their network and their customers and their sort of physical distribution strategies in a far more fact-driven way. So it doesn't require all of the executives in the business to have that really detailed understanding of the local market, having lived there for a long period of time, because the data will show them that. And we also find that even the most experienced operator in a business has a view of the market that is not always fully comprehensive. And that might be that there might be 5 or 6 large cities in a particular country, and they may well know 2 or 3 of those cities extremely well, but there'll be other pockets of other cities that they just can't know at that level of detail. And often that's where those untapped potential locations might rest. And so it is that ability to be very, very fact-driven and data-driven about strategy formulation and business process and decision-making that changes when there's access to mapped data like GapMaps. I think the final point I'd make in terms of those immediate benefits that clients get is just that reality that Asia is a complex part of the globe in terms of customer demand or customer potential, because unlike Western Europe or the US or indeed Australia, where counting people gives you a pretty good idea of what catchment potential really looks like. In many parts of Asia, that's just not the case. You can't be in Mumbai and say, I know that there's 70,000 people who live within 1.5 kilometers of this point, therefore I'm going to have a successful grocery store, fast food location, chai shop, whatever it might be. It just doesn't work that way, because it may be that 70 or 80% of that population just can't afford the product that's being offered. And so that's one of the real benefits that visualized and accurate granular data that GapMaps brings, is that it really enables our clients to understand catchment areas at far greater detail, to really understand who their customers are, where those customers live, where those customers work, and then align their store network to those particular customers.
Okay, excellent. So we just got a question from the audience. Actually, a couple of questions. So I'm going to combine them. And one is, what is a generally cost to have access to a tool like GapMaps? And then, you know, at what point does a business need a product and a service like GapMaps? You know, in terms of what size do they need? What kind of maturity must they have in order to get benefit from this?
Yeah, great question, Sean. Let me start with the second question, which is, you know, what size does a business need to be, or what level of maturity do they need to have? We work with many clients who will use, you know, GapMap as part of a market entry decision. So currently no stores, but they need to understand, you know, the market potential. They need to understand, you know, what areas of the market they might first target to start building out their store network. They might need to understand the competitor sort of intensity across different parts of the city, and those sort of insights are available through GapMaps. But equally, we work with, yeah, many retailers who've got 1,000+ stores in the countries in which we service them. So the answer to that question, it can be as small as 0. It can be as large as, you know, more than 1,000. So that in terms of maturity, what's really required is maturity around who is my customer and what is the offer that I'm taking to market. Because if the client doesn't really understand what it is they're selling and doesn't really understand who they're selling it to, then the location intelligence we provide isn't actually going to be all that suitable, because we can't help the client find the right locations, because the right locations are inextricably tied to the customer that they're targeting, and the service or the product that they're offering to those customers. So the maturity is very much about maturity of concept and maturity around definition of core customer. That is really the prerequisite to requiring and getting benefit from a provider like GapMaps. So then on to the first part of the question, which was how much does it cost? We always say to our clients that, you know, we will provide you with great value through the services that we offer. And of course, that's not really an answer, a proper answer to your question. But to give you an idea, we do price according to the value we create. And that price will vary anywhere from, say, $7,500 for accessing our platform in a particular country like Vietnam, for instance sake, would be more in a very large country like India. And then some of our larger clients might be paying you $15,000 or more to use our platform services over the course of a year. And again, you know, in very large countries, it would be larger than that. But that gives a bit of a range in terms of where we price. You know, we are very much trying to grow the demand for location intelligence services, and that means that we have to create services that hit the market at a point where they are affordable for many businesses. So, yeah, we often say, we would prefer to be working with, 10 clients paying us $10,000 to use our services, rather than one client paying us $100,000 to use our services. And that's the way we create product and insight and take it to market. We are very much about servicing relatively large numbers of clients through our platform and the other services that we provide.
Yeah, no, Tim, at that point about creating that value for your clients, I think really nails it, because whether it's Vietnam or Thailand or Taiwan, as we travel from country to country, we see many groups, many brands kind of make the wrong decisions when it comes to locations, and it is extremely costly, and it's costly at different levels, different amounts for different brands in different countries. But it's just not only costly, but very disruptive to the growth of the business, right? And I think that's the key, is if you can just minimize your risk, reduce those errors in terms of finding the right locations, I think, the payback is manyfold, many times. And I know, like you said earlier, in more developed markets like the US or Australia or Canada, there's a lot of information you can get publicly, but not so much in the greater parts of Asia, where demographic data is old, government data, census data, extremely old. And even then, perhaps not even 100% reliable. So that makes enormous sense from a value proposition. Now, you mentioned some of the features earlier. Are there any new exciting features that you can share that is not top secret, or anything else that you may want to, kind of leak the news a little bit in advance?
I think, Sean, yeah, we are obviously we're a location intelligence group, but that requires us to be sort of in equal parts, sort of technology company as we are sort of network strategy company, and this access into vast amounts of digital data, and because we provide services to clients through a tech platform in many ways, means that innovation is key. Innovation drives the ability for us to create products and services that are valuable to our client group. And we do have what we are calling our second GapMaps platform, so what we are calling GapMaps Live. We are bringing that into Asia. We're just in a trial. We're in a pilot phase now. It's well developed with our clients in other parts of the globe. The real benefit of that to clients in Asia is speed. So we know that in parts of whether Indonesia or India or even Vietnam at times, the speed of the internet can be fairly intermittent. And that can create problems for technology platforms when they're trying to upload large amounts of data for mapping files and those sorts of things. So one of the main benefits in our GapMaps Live platform is that we can load what would otherwise have been very large data files in fractions of a second, and so that makes the platform extraordinarily stable in across the whole of across the whole of a country, even in areas where the internet speed can be fairly fluctuating. The other area that I'd like to let you know about is that we are now building up new insights, not just for sort of high street locations and retail locations, but we're also doing a lot of work on shopping malls. And we know that across Asia, a lot of retail is conducted through shopping malls. And so we're now building reports that we can make available to our clients that identify a lot more about the trading potential of shopping malls, that really enable retailers to decide, of these, say, 3 or 4 options around shopping malls, which one is the best fit for my particular client base? Because currently when we look at shopping malls, the data we really have to play with until now has been what other retailers are in each of those 3 or 4 shopping malls? How large is the shopping mall in terms of gross lettable area or net retail floor space or some other such measure? And maybe the vacancy rate of the mall, or if there is pedestrian count activity. But through our analysis of digital device data, we can learn a lot more about shopping malls that create some really valuable insights for clients. So, for example, how far are customers typically traveling from home to shopping mall? So is this a shopping mall that has a very strong local catchment, or is this a shopping mall that draws customers from a much wider distance to come, or much wider area to come to that particular mall? Also, for the customers who do visit that mall, how long do they typically visit for? Is it a 40-minute shop on average, or is it a 90-minute shop on average? Because if I'm a coffee retailer, I would far prefer to be in a shopping mall where the customer stays on average for 90 minutes rather than 40 minutes, because I've got more than twice the time opportunity to sell that customer a cup of coffee. So these are the sorts of insights that we're now making available to clients to help them choose not just which location fits their network the best in terms of high streets or residential areas, but also which shopping mall has the best fit for my particular brand and my particular customer base.
Well, shopping malls and shopping centers are super popular in many parts of Asia for obvious reasons. It's just darn hot outside, and every other year, some city or some country is vying to be the shopping center capital of Asia, right? Whether it goes from Singapore to Taiwan to Thailand to Jakarta in Indonesia to the Philippines, I think it's for better or worse, it is the future, it is the present, and it will remain with us. And I think if we have tools to help evaluate which shopping centers are performing versus others that are performing less, I think that could be extremely valuable for brands that include shopping centers as part of their overall expansion strategy. Now, uh, I know that from the video you mentioned earlier also that GapMaps is available in a few countries. Can you kind of summarize what countries you are in now and what countries you expect to enter probably within the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, yeah. One of the great things about GapMaps is that we are growing in terms of the geographic areas that we cover with our platform. We're now able to provide platform services in 21 countries, and those gaps that we currently have in Asia, we're closing quite rapidly. So just in that sort of Asian region, we're in Myanmar, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, India, and we have Hong Kong that will be built out by September this year. We've got the Philippines, which I know, Sean, you're very excited about, as am I. Philippines is coming online next month, which we're really excited about. We also have South Korea that we'll have up by the end of the year in the platform. But also we can respond to client needs in that respect as well. So we've recently built out our platform in Nigeria and Kenya because we had a client who was particularly keen for us to provide services in those markets. And I guess that's the benefit for GapMaps, is because we build the data ourselves in these markets, we're not necessarily constrained by the availability of data through census data through some of the providers, which might limit our decision to be able to enter into some new markets or not. And particularly some of these very data challenge markets like a Kenya or a Nigeria, for example. But equally, that might be Myanmar or some of the Asian countries too, where high quality data has been very difficult to access in the past.
Well, that sounds like a very exciting pipeline. You guys are indeed very, very busy during these times. Now we're running up on that 35 minute time frame that we wanted to spend some time today on. Are there any final comments that you want to share with the audience about GapMaps?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think in summary, when we think about this location intelligence space that certainly GapMaps operates in, and the clients that we have are obviously very involved in location analytics and location decision making. I think for me, a sort of a parting message is that what had been a very large gap between the data rich and data poor countries, and that had existed for a long period of time, and it meant that retailers based in the US or Western Europe would have quite complex and quite well crafted sort of market distribution plans or network distribution plans. And we saw very little of that in Asia, simply because the data wasn't available to enable a really refined strategy to be built out in the same way that it could in some of the other areas. But this rapid change in digital data has really enabled this bridge to be closed that divided the data rich from data poor. And now there really is no difference in terms of data availability of high quality data in Southeast Asia versus Western Europe or Australia or the US. And in many instances, the data is not just as good, but it's actually better because we work harder to build the insights in some of these countries, where in a market like Australia, you can actually be a little bit lazy as a data builder like us, because there's really good data to pull off the shelf and put into the platform. Now, of course, that luxury doesn't exist in Southeast Asia. You've got to build it, but the ability to build really high quality data is absolutely there. And so I think there is a real opportunity for progressive retailers in Asia to take advantage of this and to be the early leaders in really crafting out fact-led, high-quality distribution strategies for their brand before their competitors can do the same. Because the competitive advantage that comes from having a well-crafted sort of market and distribution strategy is significant, and there's plenty of big global retailers who will tell you exactly that. But now there is this opportunity for brands within Asia to do exactly that and those that can should do it before their competitors can and get that advantage that comes from being the early leader in this space.
Wow, that's a great summary, Tim. I think you made a great point about, you've kind of leveled the playing field for many players, because usually for only large organizations with vast amounts of resources are they able to even attempt to get this type of data and to invest into this type of product. That probably takes years to build. And you've kind of allowed many different players in various industries to be able to leverage off of this data for their own benefit, for their own consumers, and of course their own investors to make the right decisions when it comes to expanding their businesses, whether it's domestically or internationally in other markets. Now, I think we have a small gift for all the attendees here today. I don't know, can you share a little bit about the gift that we are willing to give for the people who have taken their precious time to join us today?
Yeah, indeed, Sean, and we are grateful for everybody who's taken the time to sort of tune in and listen to Sean and myself today. So what we would love to be able to do is provide each of you with a demographic report. So a report from GapMaps that describes and provides insights into the local catchment area of a particular point of your choosing in a particular country of your choosing. So if you can send through to us the street address or the latitude, longitude point of a particular area, and we can then create a demographic report for a catchment area around there so that you can understand how many people live in that area, how many people work in that area, how many of those people might be of consuming or premium consuming class, so you can get a feel for the sort of data that's available now. And that's free of charge, and we will email that out to you in just a couple of days. So we look forward to seeing those requests come through.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great gift. Now, we have another short video about GapMaps before we wrap up. So let's roll it. Okay, well, that was a great summary of GapMaps and its some of its key benefits for consumers and clients. I'd like to thank Tim for spending some time with us today on this very timely topic. I think we can all agree that avoiding costly real estate decisions is probably now more important than ever, given the limited budgets that we have today. A reminder that we will be contacting you via email with a link to this recording of this webinar and instructions on how to get that free demographic report that Tim just mentioned earlier from GapMaps. Now, on behalf of GapMaps and VF Franchise Consulting, we thank you for your time. Stay safe and well. Tim, any departing wishes? Oh, Tim, I think you're on mute.
I got it right all the way through until the last session. But yeah, stay safe in these difficult times. Stay positive, and we're really looking forward to having the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one in the future. And thanks, Sean, for this opportunity. It's been great to talk to everybody.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe one. Bye-bye.